Welcome to the Strong for Life podcast. I'm your host, Conor O'Shea, and today I'm super excited to share two superstar client stories with you all. Kaye and Janet Cussen are joined with me today. So thank you both for taking time out of your evenings. And why don't we start with a bit about yourselves, maybe tell everyone listening who you both are and a bit about your story.
Would you like me to go first, Kaye?
I would love you to go first, Janet.
So Kaye and I are sisters, in case you haven't worked out.
Work that out.
I am a bit younger than Kaye.
10 years precisely.
But I rode for Victoria in my 20s. And
in rowing, right?
In rowing, yes. Yep. Yes. So in about 83, 84, I rode for Victoria and I put myself up for national selection for the next 5 or 6 years. So as a consequence of that, I did a lot of rowing in the boat. I did weights, pretty well just free weights 3 times a week. And because I was a lightweight, I did a lot of running as well, because I always had to lose weight, because lightweights always have to lose weight. So that was my 20s. Then in my 30s, I had a baby and had to look after him. And then...
So not so much exercise.
Not really. Yeah. I did a little bit of gym work, but I always did a little bit of... When I stopped rowing, I always did a little bit of running and a little bit of gym work and a little bit of cycling, but not terribly much really, because you just can't. And then when I was about 47, 48, Cam was old enough and I started rowing again. And I started doing gym work again. And I started training with a trainer, and he was a fan of Scott Sonnen.
Yeah. And
so I started using kettlebells before anyone even knew what they were. So that was basically my introduction to functional fitness, it's probably fair to say. Kaye had always been interested in that sort of stuff anyway. So she was always up with what the latest Scott Sonnen stuff was, with all the flow fit stuff, and then there was the Israeli fireman and there was all this other stuff. So I did that, and then I rode at the World Masters Games that were in Sydney in 2009. Trained pretty well for that, 9 sessions a week plus a bit of gym work. And then my trainer, he was studying to be a chiropractor, so he then left. He abandoned me, so I couldn't train with him anymore. And so I didn't really do very much at all. And then Kaye had started training with you, Conor, and she... I don't know how long she'd been training with you, 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, and it would have been a bit over a year, I think, at that point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she suggested that I start training with you. So I did that, and really it was only once a week in the gym. I was able to do a little bit of rowing as well. And the good thing about the gym being where it is that I got in a decent bike ride as well as a warm-up. So I did a lot more cycling as well. I'd done a little bit of running, but not very much. My knees really don't like it anymore. So training with Conor was not a big shock to me in terms of the type of work we did, in that I was used to a sort of functional, more useful type of training method. The differences to me were the locomotion stuff in particular.
GMB work.
The GMB work. The locomotion stuff was a bit different to what I was used to, but a lot of the other stuff was not terribly unusual, because I had done an awful lot of gym work over the years. I mean, really, you're talking, 40 years of gym work off and on.
Yeah.
Which is a lot, really.
Yeah. What about you, Kaye? Do you want to give a bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, I did the usual, a little bit of sport at school, and through my 20s, I did a little bit of aerobics class and that kind of stuff. Never been a gym person ever through my life. 30s, went back to school, little bit of, I think it was step classes in those days, and jumping around to music, lots of jumping around to music, all that kind of stuff. Rode my bicycle, lived in Hobart, so you got quite a bit of hill work with that. And then I started working, and work was pretty full on with shift work and overtime and all that. So that was pretty hard, and I was working in the country. By the time I hit my 50s, figured I really needed to get some cardiovascular work happening, as well as more strength work happening. Hated the gym, never been near it. Did pick up yoga in my late 30s and kept that on and off as a practice. So flexibility, not too bad in certain directions, but other areas a problem. But didn't have the strength and didn't have the cardiovascular work. So I moved back to Melbourne 2014 and decided that I'd tried to join a gym in the country. It just didn't work. Didn't have a PT at that point. Came to Melbourne and started working with a colleague of yours, Phil, and made it work by finding it. I just happened to luck out. I walked into a gym that was on the walk from work to home. Decided to do it in the middle of the day when I was working a half day. So there was no escape. Only signed up for half an hour once a week. And so that was my beginning. And then Phil, as you know, needed to change. So he recommended you, and you suggested twice a week for an hour. My jaw dropped and went, okay, let's see how that goes. And he recommended you largely because I'd started seeing the yoga group I was working with start using handstands in their practice, and I decided that's where I wanted to go. So that was a huge goal for me. And because you have that knowledge base, that was, I think, why Phil suggested I work with you. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it is at the moment. I now actually, I could even say I enjoy going into a gym these days, up to a point. The music is atrocious, I have to say, by and large.
I agree. That's something that needs to be fixed, definitely. So that's really thorough background. So like Janet, you've done a lot of heavy, rowing training for 40 years, and then before you started working with Kaye and me in the sessions, how long you had a bit of a break in that time between kind of how long were you kind of inactive before then?
A couple of years. I was doing a bit of rowing, but that was about it.
10 years? When did you stop with Emo?
Oh, no, it wouldn't have been. Perhaps 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, because you were doing it when I used to drop down to Melbourne, and then I moved 2015. You weren't doing it anymore then. No, maybe 5 years, something like that.
So 4 or 5 years, and then, Kaye, something I always tell people is your goal of wanting to be able to do handstands into, when you're 80. Is that still a goal?
Oh yes, hit 70 this year, so I only have to hang out for another 10.
Yeah, and I think that's
already up.
That's a really yeah, exactly. I think it's an important thing to maybe talk about today, because, and you can agree or disagree with this, but maybe sometimes people can maybe feel that they can't change a situation because you had no hand balancing experience. Really, you did a bit of hand balancing in
zero. Never
zero.
As a kid. Zero.
Yeah. And so you had a yoga practice, but you know, when we started working on handstands, you were 66 probably.
Yep.
And now you're able to do handstands. You're extremely strong. You know, both of you are holding wall handstands for over 60 seconds. So you've built some serious strength. So maybe talk about maybe was there anything that either of you were skeptical about before joining the program, about maybe injuries or ability to achieve goals that you've achieved, because you're doing some pretty impressive stuff now, you know, 3 or 4 years later?
I mean, I always had trouble when you'd say, what's your goal for the year, Kay? Well, for me, the major goal is to stay injury free, because when I do end up with a bit of a difficulty, it's much slower to come out the other side. And so for me, that's a primary goal in a sense, to try and hold it. And it's difficult because when an injury these days just sneaks up on me slowly. It's not necessarily an automatic, okay, I know I've done something wrong. So that makes it very hard to monitor and to keep track of it. So for me, skeptical, no, not really, just open to whatever, other than try and be injury free and try not to have, I never had huge goals other than I wanted to be able to do a handstand at some point in the whole progression. Did you have anything?
I had no
skepticism. We're not skeptical generally. We're open.
I was already a convert to the whole functional fitness thing.
Yes.
And I suspect Kaye was too, because of Scott Sonnen and Kit Lachlan and all that sort of stuff over the years that she's been doing. And
that's true. I've taught classes of both of their kind of work.
You know, so
others,
So really, in terms of, you know, having any sort of concern about an outcome, no, I never, you know. I mean, you've just got to trust in the process, really, don't you? And if you think that the person that sets your program and you're training with knows what they're doing, well, then, you know, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And given that you came so highly recommended.
Let's talk about because Janet, you weren't really planning on doing handstands, but you seem to be enjoying handstands a lot over the last year.
So when we had yes, Kaye would do her handstands and I would think, oh my God, what are you doing, Kaye? What is the point? Anyway, I mean, I understood why she was doing it, for upper body strength and improving balance and all those sorts of things. So that made sense. Anyway, one day we were here training with Kaye during the lockdown, and I said to Kaye, I think I need to start doing handstands as well. So that's when I started, basically, and that was why. I'm not quite sure why, but now I'm so immensely proud of myself because, as Kaye says, as a party trick, being able to do the wall walk, people are like, oh my God, what are you doing? It's very impressive.
It is very impressive.
Got the wow factor. One of my goals, whatever you do, it needs to have a wow factor attached so that others will look and drop their jaw. And perhaps, I mean, Kaye was saying when that yoga practice she was with and they were doing them, but it was not terribly structured. Yeah, the teaching, the methodology of teaching, having spent a lot of time with you, fine-tuning it, it wasn't very well set up. It was just a matter of keep trying, with a little bit of instruction, but not as detailed or with as much progressiveness about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I, really, following that process of beginning to do them makes it really quite easy. Well, it's not easy, but you can see the progress and you can see the improvement. I mean, I would say my upper body strength has improved quite a bit, even not that it was bad, but it's improved quite a bit, particularly with the wall walking stuff. I notice that it's easier and I feel stronger when I do it. And then when we go and do a little bit of other weight work with the free weights or whatever, I notice that I can put the weight up or that sort of stuff. So that's a nice side benefit of it, really, for me. Even in the boat, if I go for a row, I can tell that my upper body strength is better. I can feel it.
That's great. Yeah, maybe just
and
talk.
What's nice about it is it just happens. Do you know what I mean? If you know, so you're doing your handstand practice and you fart-assing around essentially, but in fact you're improving your upper body strength at the same time.
Yeah, because you both would have had a pretty good base, Kaye more kind of the yoga base, and you were doing PT as well, and then Janet, you would have had a lot of upper body strength but more pulling strength from rowing, right?
Yes.
So maybe talk about specific changes or benefits you've experienced. For you, Janet, I think definitely like mobility has been a big thing that's dramatically changed over the last 2 or 3 years, right?
Well, it's always been an issue. Flexibility, hip flexibility for me has always been an issue. And
you haven't exactly worked at it.
Never.
Yeah.
There is that element.
So when I was, because I rode through the 80s, we didn't stretch. We would do gym work, no stretching. If I did an aerobics class, they would often have stretching at the end, a little bit, but it was not something that really ever did it for me. And I don't think I was ever terribly flexible anyway. So that, because, I mean, if you think about how many strokes I must have taken in my life, if you take, 20 strokes a minute for 2 hours, 12 times a week, that's an awful lot of strokes where you are essentially tightening your hip flexors, really. So, and I mean, I can't really, I couldn't even do a push-up. Which is ridiculous. But you can now.
Well, you would be able to row a lot of weight. You would be able to pull a lot of weight, but your pressing strength was very imbalanced.
Terrible.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
And your favorite stretch now? What would you say is it couch
there is
stretch?
No such thing.
What is most beneficial might be the better description.
The thing that I find for me most useful is when we do, like we were doing those Jefferson curls, right? Yeah. It's like a weighted stretch. For me, they seem to be the most effective because, or doing the single leg RDL with a bit of weight. So that sort of stuff makes more sense to me than just holding a goddamn stretch for 2 minutes, which I do, but I don't like.
Yeah.
So probably the couch stretch is the most stretch I do at the moment, is the one that I do.
Because it will improve the hip flexibility, which will improve the handstand performance.
Yeah. And that's something we've noticed as well, Janet, that your ability to straighten your legs when you're upside down, that was very kind of compromised probably 6-12 months ago, because your hip flexors were pulling into your kind of abdominal area, and now it's dramatically improved. So I can see that you're just doing couch stretch probably as much as you used to row now, every day, multiple times a day.
Quite. But I mean, I'm happy to continue to do it as long as things improve. I can't tell that it's improved because it just feels the same to me. Although we were doing some locomotion today, and there's no doubt that my bum is higher and my feet are closer to my hands. So that's sort of evidence that things are improving. So that's good.
Yeah. Do you feel any crossover in day-to-day life stuff, like doing activities that you're like, oh, I feel this feels easier or more accessible?
Moving the boat in and out of the water, is that, do you notice that?
No, not moving the boat, but getting in and out of the boat.
Oh, that's it.
Right.
That's a one-legged exercise. And if the boat is not level, you've got one leg here and one leg there, or you've got, actually that's easy, but that one's hard. So you've got the left leg high and the bottom leg below. And what I used to do is I used to put my bum over the seat and just sort of drop the last couple of inches. Whereas now you can actually, so even that, so the balance and the single leg strength, we did quite a lot of work on that at one point, and I noticed a big difference there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long to see the improvement, which is really quite gratifying.
Yeah. What about you, Kay? Any kind of results that you're really happy with over the last, 2 years, 3 years in particular? Or last year, actually? I think, well, in particular, from my side of things, your endurance and strength in your upper body has really gone very, very impressive over the last kind of 6 to 9 months.
Yes, I hit one of my goals. I can actually do a chin up now. So that was very exciting. That was the end of last year. So that was, testament to the strength, increased strength.
Well, and the ring work as well.
Yeah, we're doing, the ring work has helped with a lot of it.
Yeah.
So one of the next goal, because now I am creating goals, is to do a pistol squat. Did I tell you that? That's next on the list.
Great. Okay.
So now, of course, we've been doing them.
Yeah.
Little bits of practicing bits. And
using the rings to assist. It's like, oh, God. A ring-assisted pistol squat.
It's even more motivation now to have your hip flexors even more open. So that's going to be a win-win. Perfect, ladies.
Well, I was thrilled when we were doing the ring work, and I managed to successfully jump upside down
as opposed to
walking up the pole.
And skin the cat. Yeah, and I think it's important as well for people listening. Like, you're doing stuff now that there's a lot of guys who would be in their 20s or 30s that physically wouldn't get close to what you're able to do. Like, no chance at all. So it's very, very impressive. And I guess a good question to kind of finish with would be, who would you recommend the program for, and who would probably be not a good fit if they were to?
Good fit of people like me who really are not that interested in using machines at the gym because it's boring as all get out. Janet sees the usefulness of doing it. I just find it boring as all get out. And so I think working with a PT one-on-one is hugely beneficial because it becomes tailored to you. And the older you get, the more nuanced you need to be around that. Also, as Jan mentioned to me before, the idea is sometimes there'll be an injury developing, and so the modification needs to happen so that you can keep training rather than say, oh, no, I got an injury, we just got to pack it all in at this point and often never get back to it. So there's those aspects. And then the ones not, the super flexible, hyper flexible guys that have to be very careful about, hypermobile, have to be very careful about what they take on. And I think for them, it's more useful to actually do very basic weight work because they don't need that range of motion and that can take them into damage area a bit too easily.
Yeah.
Whereas inflexible people like me, what is interesting about it is that I'm sure a lot of people who think, you've got to make sure when you've finished a session at the gym that you're sweating and puffing, whereas this sort of program work is quite deceptive in that it's strenuous in ways you wouldn't think of.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of body weight stuff. improves your coordination. We had a girlfriend of mine here, and she was struggling with some of the movements, which was really hilarious. So improving your coordination would be a good thing as well. And
balance. It also there's
balance and the fact that, you know, trying to make yourself, because I'm very right-handed, so I'm quite weaker on one side. So this sort of work, I think, is very good at improving the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly
structural balance in the body. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Particularly if you've got a trainer who sort of gets that and so can do the individual side work, not just
to bring
whole of body stuff. Yeah. So because as Kaye says, you need someone who can see where the areas are that need to be addressed. So I would imagine people will be skeptical about if they're actually going to improve their strength or their fitness doing this sort of work.
Yeah.
Really?
That's a really good point. Yeah, because a lot of people will look at it and they say, oh, that's not really.
What are they? They're not working hard.
It's not giving me enough of a workout. But then
you
stick with it for, 6-12 months and you're the strongest you've ever been in most cases. And Kaye, you made a good point as well. Around adjusting stuff when you do get an injury and to keep training, to work around stuff and not just stop, because when you do stop, then you inevitably it can turn into a 6-12 month period that you kind of stop training completely, right? Great, ladies. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking time to share a bit more about your story. Again, I think it's like we were saying before we hit record, it's what you're doing feels normal for you because you've been doing it for so long, but you're doing some really incredible feats of strength and mobility. And I think it's very inspiring for a lot of people out there. So yeah, maybe just to leave on this last point, maybe I'd like you to speak about this, especially sometimes as people get, into their 50s, 60s and beyond, they might think that they can't make any changes and maybe this is just the way things are. So if someone's listening, thinking that way, what advice would you give to them?
Start, but be gentle and start slowly. It's not trying to, climb Mount Everest in one go. It's one day at a time and decide to have a go.
Yeah, great. And Janet, yourself?
Well, when I started training with Connor and Kaye, I was only doing one session a week. And even then, my flexibility was improving. So even if you only do one session a week, you will, it's very slow, but, we don't have a time frame. As Kaye says, we're working towards the Centenarian Olympics.
Yeah.
So even once a week, you're going to get a benefit out of. I'm sure a lot of people think, I can't commit to 3 times a week. Well, you don't need to. Even once a week will give you something.
Yeah. And then that does give you once you get into that habit and the routine, it does become easier to increase it. Like I say, I only started, I felt all I could manage was 30 minutes once a week. That's it. In a gym, in that building, that structure. So it's just starting somewhere and feeling happy with the amount that you're taking on and not trying to overdo it. And you can build muscle and you can build strength. And it is the consistency that gives you that, which is what you always say as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So I really appreciate you both sharing that. I think that's really valuable for people listening. And yeah, again, I'm so I think you're just both doing incredibly well. It's awesome to see each month there's like a new thing that you've succeeded in achieving. And exciting years ahead as well.
Without a doubt.